So it looks like people this summer have issues with the art world. Let's talk about a few things. So I read an article in Hyperallergic and Vice magazine just this last couple of weeks that people need to start rethinking the gallery model. You know, do galleries really do what they say they're going to do for artists, and are the artists really doing a lot of the heavy lifting? There's a lot of answers to that, but the other thing we're hearing about the art market these days is that the blue chip galleries, they're closing, sales are down, and those larger galleries are now plucking out younger artists on the rise to kind of help focus their program to give them good profits, maybe not huge profits, but also letting them sell artwork for higher prices than they've had before, while not selling as much of their blue chip work, which is selling for slightly lower prices. No one wants the blue chip prices to fall. Okay, so that's the basic rundown of what we've got going on. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it from the gallery side first, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so here's the thing. The art gallery market, the blue chip art market, as we know, which consists of really about 12 galleries worldwide. All of those galleries have multiple locations. All of their artists sell for like $500,000 and more, are going through a bit of a recession. Fine. Here's what's going on with that. Those galleries have not had any kind of recession happen for at least 30 years. The last time the art market kind of busted, if you will, was in the late 1980s and the 90s, when the market kind of bottomed out a little bit and then prices started rising. You might even remember in 2008 when the entire housing market just crashed in the United States. The art market went into hyperdrive. So this is not a problem really for a lot of artists. This is a problem primarily for about 150 artists and about 10 to 12 galleries. They're the ones who are going to be feeling this. Also, of course, the buyers of that artwork, who are primarily super rich people, they're going to lose a few $1,000,000 on some investments and artworks they've bought. But remember, they never buy it as an investment. Keep telling yourself that, by the way, if you want to feel good about it at night. They're going to lose a few $1,000,000 on their investment. I'm not going to feel real bad for them. The fact they're able to buy this stuff with pocket change really tells you just how much money they have. They're going to be fine. But what you're going to hear are a lot of articles about, oh my gosh, the art world is imploding. Well, let's put a few things out to the plate here. If you're selling art for less than $100,000 a piece, you're not going to be affected by this. It's that easy. And in fact, you might do better in this for a number of reasons. And we'll touch on that in just a second. But what we're really talking about when we talk about the art market kind of imploding, we're hearing that both Bloom & Poe, over the Bloom & Poe galleries, based initially out of Los Angeles, both of them have now broken off and have kind of left the traditional gallery world. Paul Kasman, who's been a heavyweight dealer for a number of years, he's recently retired. And then his kind of second in commands are taking over and starting their own galleries. Look, I'm 62 years old. Paul Kasman has been around forever. I'm saying he's probably close to 70. It's not surprising he'd retire. So there's a lot of stuff like this. If you look at it, no one wants to work their entire life. And truth be told, running a gallery, doing a gallery show plus 4 or 5 art fairs every year, that's a lot of work. You're doing, let's say, 6 to 8 gallery shows a year, 4 art fairs at a minimum, all the other stuff that's involved on top of that. It's tiring. It's a real job. You're 70 years old, take a break. You've made your money. And in Paul Kasman's case, we know he's made the money. And that's okay. Lord knows everyone deserves to make their money. So that's not a problem. But don't view this, especially if you're an artist who's watching my videos, because let's be honest, like Jasper Johns isn't watching my videos. You know, if you're selling work for under $100,000, under $50,000, which is probably 90% of the art market, you're probably not going to be truly affected by this. You might hear some rumbles here and there, but you're not really going to be affected by it. Are dealers going to complain? Of course they are. Dealers are going to complain anytime they can. There's kind of like this, you know, hall of mirrors. They do pretty well, but it's hard work. And no one's saying the work they do isn't hard. But they also take 50% of what other people make, and then they're selling art by 20 to 40 other artists at a time. They're going to be okay. But yeah, their money is going to tighten up, and we have to be respectful of that. I like art dealers all in all. Do they all have a little bit of bullshit with them? Of course they do. Do artists have a little bit of bullshit with us? God damn it, we all do. Everyone knows that. So understand that. Understand that when you start reading these articles about how the art market is falling, remember there's 4 or 5 different art markets. There's probably even more than that. They're talking specifically about the upper end blue chip art market. Galleries to be affected, you know, Gagosian, Hauser, Zwerner, Pace, Perrotin, a few others. And that's just what it is. These galleries have been through this before. They'll go through it again and they'll be just fine. So is the art market failing? No, it's just resetting, and that's where it's at. Okay, so now into part 2 of this. I saw a couple articles in the last week and a half, one from Vice, one from Hyperallergic, about are art galleries really worth the 50% they're taking from artists? And that's been like a conversation we've had since like the dawn of time. And I get all sides of it. I know that about a year and a half ago, I had a conversation with a gallery that I have, and she had been reading this article, and I read it too, where a business company went and did research and thought that the galleries should be taking 60% and the artists should be getting 40%. That conversation didn't end well between the gallerist and I think we both just decided to ignore it, which makes sense. So the new side is, of course, that the gallery should be taking less than the artists. I get that. I can see both sides of this, and this is where I think 50% becomes a really kind of solid kind of compromise, for lack of a better phrase. But here's the thing. What a lot of artists have been promised by galleries is that galleries are going to go and take them outside of the gallery. They're going to take them to the local museums, to local curators, they're going to get them in bigger shows. And we all know that a lot of galleries don't do that. You know, and that's a problem because that's part of the promise of being in a big gallery is that they're going to take you and show you to other people, not just people who are salespeople, not just designers and decorators, but like curators who are going to put you in important collections. And they're going to try to get you in like group shows at museums and what have you, in art centers. And a lot of galleries just don't do this. And this is the problem where we start looking at that 50% and wondering, are the galleries doing really everything they tell us they're doing? Now, there's a couple other things here. Galleries are mostly responsible for selling your work. That's probably 75 to 80% of their job. For a lot of galleries, that's 100% of their job. And, you know, I think you have to understand there's only but so many galleries that have access to curators and museum folk. And I know, like in New York City, that list is probably 6, and it's the same 6 galleries I mentioned a few minutes ago, maybe a few extras. But in other parts of the country, you know, as if you're an artist maybe working, let's say, in Albuquerque, and I'm just making Albuquerque up, there's probably a local museum, and that local museum probably does stay on top of what the local artists are doing and has more opportunity to show those local artists. I grew up in DC. The DC museums are all national museums. They would rather die than show a DC artist. The New York City museums are much the same way, although they'll show New York artists because New York artists are considered national and international artists. There's a little bit of a benefit to that. But this is the issue that artists have. Are galleries really doing what they say they're going to do, and are they really worth what they take? And this is a conversation you've got to have with yourself and with your gallerist, and it's going to be a not one blanket covers everybody kind of situation. If you have a gallery that only does sales, well, then they should be selling your work on a fairly regular basis. And if they're not selling your work on a regular basis and they're not introducing anything else, what's the point? So these are the things you have to look at as an artist. The one thing I'll say about galleries is we kind of relate this all the way back to the bigger galleries. The art market is finally being affected by the internet. And we've kind of heard about it here and there and this and that, and some people claim they sell everything off of Instagram or what have you. I don't know how much of that I truly believe. But the internet has finally kind of taken a look at the art market, and they're looking at ways to disrupt it and slice it and dice it. There's more and more platforms to sell your artwork. Some are good, some are not so good. That's not to be unexpected. However, galleries have always been slow to kind of accommodate to these things and have always been very gatekeepy about those things. So this is a thing that's now starting to change. And you might be an artist that's kind of on the cusp of being on the internet and doing all of your sales through that and not having galleries. And that's kind of cool, and that's really refreshing and exciting. But you also might have relationships with galleries and you're wondering, why they're not leveraging their digital assets to sell your work. And that's a fair question too. So this is where we start looking at this conversation between, are galleries worth what they do, or are they taking too much from an artist? For me, I've always looked at it as the galleries are actually connecting themselves with people I'll never meet. And that in itself is worth quite a bit. And then it's a place for you to go see my work in other cities where I'm not there. You have people who kind of have you covered. For me, that's always been a good relationship. Not all of them are great relationships, however, but on the whole, most of them are good relationships. And I really respect the galleries I work with. But you have to make that decision for yourself, and you have to make that decision based on who you're working with and how you're working with them. These kind of articles that roll out of like Vice and Hyperallergic truly have the best intentions. They're not always perfect, but that's okay. Nothing is really ever perfect. But you've got to read them and understand they're not necessarily gospel, because a lot of things are different between everyone. And don't forget, galleries don't all operate the exact same way. And so you've got to understand the gallery and the people you're working with, and you actually have to like and respect the people you're working with. If you just see your gallerist as a paycheck, you're probably not going to stick with that gallery for too long, because primarily they understand that you don't really respect them in the way that they want to respect your work. Anyhow, that's it for me today. Kind of a short one. I want to get this out. Summer's almost over, and with summer almost over, I need to really start making a little more videos than once a month. It's been a little slack on my end. So expect to see more from me lately. Hope you guys are doing really well. Thanks for listening this far. Like and subscribe if you can. Comment below if you even feel like it. And I'll talk to you soon next time. Thanks.